Hello, and welcome to the Conversations in Time podcasts from the ORC. In this podcast, the guys will be talking about historical what-ifs, or counterfactual history for the aficionados in the audience.
Right. Hello, and welcome to another Conversations in Time podcast. I'm John N.
And I'm Ian G.
Remember? And welcome to another sort of this one's a half and half podcast for a change. Ian's in the studio, if we call it that, and I'm outside. The other difference is that we're 3,000 miles apart as well. So I'm in Long Island on a very nice day with the sun shining, and unfortunately Ian's in the UK with the weather a bit more.
Yes, it's a delightful summery 13 degrees and it's raining, but never mind.
29 degrees, 28 degrees, very blue skies. And where am I? So just out of interest, sorry, go on, Ian.
I was going to say, what's blue sky? You'll have to send us a picture of what that is, just to remind us.
Oh yeah. There's a few wispy clouds, so it's very pleasant. Although where I am is not far from quite a main road, so hopefully you won't see the traffic, or I won't get too close to it. It's I'll try and wander somewhere else. Anyway, where am I? So I'm actually in the East Hills Cemetery in a place called, or just outside Glen Head, which is a town in Long Island, on a place in one of the regions called Oyster Bay. A bit funny, Long Island, where it's near Manhattan, there's a couple of sort of lumps that stick out. One's called Little Neck, one's called Great Neck, and then the next one's Oyster Bay. But you can guess why it's called Oyster Bay, because they fish there. No, they used to catch oysters. Yeah. And why am I here? Right, so there was a sign. It's not here now, although I think I understand why the sign's not here now. That this cemetery has graves of Hessian soldiers who fought in the American Revolutionary War. They're unmarked, so I've been wandering around, can't find them. But I can't find the actual, I don't know whether there's a sign that says this area has the unmarked graves of these Hessian soldiers. But it's an interesting, the issue with the Revolutionary War was that Britain had got a lot of troops, but they got a lot of territorial issues ongoing with the French, and needed every man that it could get. The US was probably considered the lower priority rather than the Caribbean, because the Caribbean had sugar, and that was very profitable. The American colonies didn't have much. Tea, they didn't have tea, what am I talking about? They had some tobacco, but it wasn't as big a deal then as it obviously became. So I think there was 40,000 Hessian mercenaries were part of the force that was sent across, or the troops that were sent across.
Yes, and I guess as well that Hessian being a part of, or Hesse rather, being a part of northern Germany, was that associated with German George the King? So he was able to tap up his contacts.
Yeah, so as I understand it, the term Hessian is a general term for all of the German soldiers, and they weren't all from Hesse. And Anhalt, Hesse, something like that. And but you're right, the soldiers, William George wasn't just the King of England. His father and his grandfather were both German, and they were princes of this Anhalt Hesse. And when you read, I was doing a little bit of reading, and when the war actually broke out, a lot of his relatives in Germany actually offered these troops up front. They didn't even have to go and ask. Only a few thousand, but ultimately he didn't go cap in hand asking for mercenaries. I mean, I think he did, ultimately he did. And the deal they did as well, from what I've read, where George III said for every soldier that died, he would pay some compensation.
When you say he would pay, what does that mean?
Well,
you mean the British taxpayer, presumably?
Yeah.
Well, that was nice of him. So I suspect that was nonsense. Did that ever actually come to pass?
I don't know. I hadn't found out. I mean, there was some, apparently one of the other princes made some comment about when he was watching the soldiers march off, saying, "Oh, now the cattle go to war" or something.
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't care. They weren't the ones being shot at, but they were the ones who'd get the money. So interesting times.
Yeah.
Apparently, if it is 40,000, I might have to do a check on that, but I think it was 40,000 troops. 50% of them, or 45% of the troops actually that survived stayed in the US. They didn't go back to their homeland. And one of the reasons why there's potentially a fairly large German community or German ancestry in a community in Long Island, or certainly part of it anyway. But I can't find the stones and there's no signpost, but never mind. It's very.
So why do you think the signpost has disappeared then?
All right. So I was reading further, and there's an annual celebration, and I think that it was a poster that I saw advertising the celebration, which starts at the cemetery, and then they have another session at the local church. So there's a couple of historical society events, one of which is in the cemetery, but they were advertising the actual Hessian celebration that they do at this local historical group support. So I think that's what it was.
So it was just like a temporary wooden,
It's like a poster, strung between bits of wood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No doubt they'll put it back up at the time. I think it's in December when they do it. It's near Christmas. And we were here round about that time, so it probably works. We've been here twice now in the Christmas period, so maybe that's why it was there both times. Yeah, I'll keep looking. There's no doubt about that. It's just difficult walking around all the graves looking at what they are.
So is there a church nearby? I mean, why is there because normally ancient graveyards are associated with churches, aren't they? So how is?
But there isn't a church here. No.
Oh, weird then, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the things that's slightly weird, I'll have to look into it a bit more, is the town Glen Head, which is essentially across this main road, that was founded in 1878. Yet the graves of the Hessian soldiers would have been 1776, so potentially 100 years earlier. So
and also, 1878 or whatever. That's like 5 minutes ago, really, relatively speaking, isn't it? Why? I mean, do you know why they were there in the first place? I mean, why were they dead? If you know what I mean, why were they getting buried there?
That's right. I mean, it'd be nice to talk to somebody from.
So there's no obvious sign of a battle. There's no sign of a battle, but there's no signage on the maps or anything for a battle or anything, or.
Well, there were some battles on Long Island.
Yeah.
But I think they were closer to New York. So when the troops first arrived in New York in whenever it was, 1777 or 77, there was a battle of Brooklyn Heights. Brooklyn's on Long Island, and they almost captured Washington, but he managed to escape. There's a what if. What if the British had have captured him on the first battle? The Hessians, and there were a couple of other battles on Long Island. So I'm assuming. I mean, this is we're 30 miles from Manhattan, so I don't know why they're buried here. That does seem unusual.
Well, the presumption. Go on.
No, go on.
Well, presumption is that there must have been a camp. So whether these were either people who died of illness or disease, or they may have been wounded, and so there must, if there was no obvious town there at the time, I don't know what the topography is like. Is it flat? Is it a nice place to have a big camp? I mean, for thousands of soldiers.
We're on the North Shore of Long Island.
Yeah, I'm talking about the local topography rather than but is it?
And it's not it's not hilly. It's not hilly as such. I mean, there's some heights, but it's not. You wouldn't class this as being somewhere to struggle to find It don't know. I mean, at the
Well,
end
I suppose is there water? Is there streams and things? I mean, that's the obvious thing. I mean,
so the coast is about 2 miles away in a straight line. So a place there's an inlet.
yeah, but you can't. You can't drink that, can you? I mean, I was thinking of it. You know, if it was a camp, I mean,
there are streams around here.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, there might have been a camp or a temporary or otherwise. You just don't know. I mean, somebody will know somewhere. You know, it's somebody will know. You would imagine somebody somewhere knows.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And the article that I was reading didn't actually say why they were buried here, which is really, why are they buried here?
So I wonder if the cemetery, you know, it's a bit QED or catch-22, whatever the term is. I wonder if the cemetery was there because of the Hessian graves rather than the Hessians are buried there because of the cemetery. Because if there's no town, there's no church. It seems funny.
I've got a feeling there was a cemetery here because there was another article, which I didn't read properly, where it shows a gravestone of whoever owned the land, and that was 1710. So it's a
that's a long time ago, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. So the assumption is that was somebody who was Dutch, because it would have been New Amsterdam, certainly in 1710. I don't know the date. It shows you how shonky my research is. I don't do enough.
No, I think I'd have to Google it, but I think New York was before 1710, surely.
I
mean, it was roundabout. It was. I mean, it was. Let me just. I'll Google it.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's not a crucial point.
No, it's like I'd only just listened to a podcast about the Dutch East India Company and the British, because it was a British captain who said.
Sorry, 1664, New York. So well before 1710.
But that's New York, not New Amsterdam.
Yes.
All right, that is well before.
I knew it was round about the restoration of the monarchy in England, as it would have been then. It was something, you know, which was roughly about then. So, you know, it was, you know, I mean, the reason I know this because I read a book by Robert Harris, who's quite a well-known historical fiction writer, and it was in that book. And that was all about the chasing down of the traitors who had signed the death warrant of Charles I. So I know it was all roughly around the restoration of the monarchy. But anyway, we digress.
Well, no, so just to fill my knowledge gap then. So when did the British take over New Amsterdam from...
They say 1664, because that's why they renamed it.
Sorry, so when did the Dutch first what was the date when the Dutch first New Amsterdam? So 1664 is when it ends. How long did they have? I can't remember.
1623.
40 years.
Yeah.
So it was Dutch for 40 years, and then
British for English stroke British for another 150 years. Yeah, and then American, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does make you wonder what those troops were doing there. And you can speculate. I can't imagine it could have been a large army camp because, you know, or a brigade or whatever, because you would be British soldiers mixed up with them. And well, again, I suppose you know, just graves of the Hessians. It's just a convenient tag. Certainly, you know, not disputing about Hessians. There may have been other people mixed up with them, and it's interesting. Yeah.
It's funny. There's nobody here in the cemetery, and the car's just driven up, and I don't know whether that's an employee or somebody.
Yeah, it doesn't say police on it, but get arrested.
No, that's right. Yeah, he didn't look at. Well, I couldn't tell what he was looking at. Whether he looked at me or something. Anyway, just walking on down the road. Anyway, sorry. Oh yeah, 40 years. Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, so it was an interesting time, late 17th century.
It was. I mean, it's an interesting part of American history because it's, as you say, there's an awful lot of twists and turns. And it's quite
a history here as well, isn't there? It's not like 200 years old; it's 400 years old.
Yes, and due respect to anybody American listening to this, it's just that it's almost an extension of European history. I mean, America doesn't become America in inverted commas really until, or doesn't generate its own history, if you like, and until this point, you know, previous to this point, it's you know, it's a colony of various European countries, and it's just they're doing things in relation to the homeland, and then suddenly they're not. So it's an interesting part of time, and to think that all these famous people weren't really Americans as such. They were colonial British or Dutch or whatever. It's.
Oh yeah, they certainly wouldn't have considered themselves anything other than colonists of a European country.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's bring it forward then, because we said on the last outside broadcast that we'd talk about the election as it was ongoing. So this is the second week of the UK general election, not the US one. One's going all in a funny. Well, I won't say it's going in a funny direction yet, but who the hell knows? All of the malarkey going on. But so UK general election, and Ian, we know that you managed to vent your spleen a little bit, and that probably made you feel good. Getting rid of,
Yeah, so it's 3 weeks to go of the longest pointless election in history, in as much as I think we know who's going to win, thank God. But famous last words. But yeah, so what's happened since the last time? Well, I mean, our esteemed Prime Minister couldn't be bothered joining the rest of humanity in D-Day. He had to go home to make. He left mid afternoon. Yep. He had to come back to do an interview, and the interview was aired yesterday. And what was the great thing that he had an interview? Well, apparently he had a really, he struggled with his upbringing because he didn't have Sky TV. The poor lad. I mean, oddly enough, I didn't have Sky TV either. And 3/4 of the population of UK didn't have Sky TV in the 1990s, I suspect. So, although interestingly enough, somebody's produced a picture today of his parents' pharmacy shop, call it what you like, and lo and behold, there's a Sky TV satellite dish above the shop where I believe they lived. But that could have been Photoshop, so I don't know. So it's an interesting thing to claim and then find that actually maybe he did have a Sky TV, But anyway, so other than that, one of his aides has been caught betting on the election. His personal private secretary, who's a fellow MP, put a bet on the date of the election 2 days before Sunak announced it. The assumption being that he knew when the date was, and that, I'm a Conservative politician. I'm just going to run down the betting shop and use some insider information to make 500 quid. I mean, really?
Is that what he bet on? I thought he was betting on the result, and he'd bet on Labour.
No, he bet on the date.
Oh, right.
Which was,
working. It was interesting if he'd have bet on the result.
No, well, no, he's not going to. He's going to bet on a dead cert, isn't he? So. Yeah, and then Labour have announced their manifesto today, and there's nothing particularly surprising in that. As Keir Starmer said, he's trying to be the Prime Minister, not an act in a circus, so he's not pulling anything out of hats. So there's nothing particularly in that people haven't heard of before. Yeah, so it's all...
Corbyn style, I'll put anything in the manifesto, just ask what you want, and I'll say yes.
No, he's not done that. No, it's everything's funded in... Although there is some concern from people that he's dancing to Conservative Party's tune, in as much as they try and goad Labour into saying, "Well, we're all going to do this," and they counter it and saying, "Well, in reality, you're creating a manifesto that certainly economically wise the Conservatives could sign up for." But having said that, the economy is in such a state that there's not a great deal of wiggle room anyway. The economy yesterday, the announcement. It was completely flat. There was no growth in the last quarter, and April actually went down. Or was it April had no growth? To be fair, I can't recall. But it's not exactly booming, shall we say? No,
that's right. I didn't think. I thought they weren't being drawn on tax cuts. I thought they were trying to stick Labour Party.
Well, no, they're certainly not offering any. No, they're not offering any tax cuts. And but they're also saying they're not neither party are suggesting they'll increase the tax thresholds, which is a form of tax.
Increase,
yeah. But again, if you look at the state of the country, we don't need tax cuts. What we need is investment in public services. Right. So this concept. Me personally, I never get this. Every 5 years, somebody comes and offers you sweeties. It's about competent management of the country. I don't expect as a person, as an individual, I don't expect somebody to come and make my life better. It's for me to make my life better. So create a framework saying that you get 500 quid here and 400 pounds there, what utter nonsense for children. It's about making the economy work. It's about making the NHS work. It's about having policemen when you need them. Railways that work, infrastructure that is built, not 80 billion pounds chucked away and nobody's at fault. HS2. I don't get it. I don't get this. 3 weeks before you elect, I'll give you 50 quid or 300 quid or I'll tell you that there's 20,000 extra policemen, and in reality there isn't. I just don't. But it obviously appeals to some people.
They didn't use that, did they? That wasn't started. I don't remember in the 80s that Harold Wilson. No, but there was
more a serious generation of politicians, like them or dislike them. You can imagine Margaret Thatcher putting up with any of the idiots that have been in the Conservative Party in the last 5 years.
Well, actually, did have a few. Yeah, some. I wouldn't even call them rascals. Scumbags.
Those were more personal peccadillos, shall we say? Affairs, and I mean, that's just human life. But they weren't. Give me
your bike and get another job, bloke.
Who was that? Who was that?
It was the one who looked like Skeletor. Who was that? The tall, gaunt one.
You mean Norman Tebbit?
Yeah.
Yes, but my point would be that, as I was saying, like him or loathe them, they were serious people. They weren't Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and some of the other headbangers who have got who have no respect for anybody other than themselves. Norman Tebbit loathed him, but he'd had a real job. He'd been in the RAF. He'd been a British Airways pilot. Blah blah blah. He'd been a union representative. Would you believe? Yeah, and I didn't like him, but you wouldn't be in any doubt he was a serious individual. You couldn't say that about Truss or Johnson or bloody Cameron. Even come to that. I mean, they're all, and John Corbyn obviously as well. And even to a certain extent Miliband, who was always a little bit weird. There definitely has been Ed Miliband. That would be. There always has been. I think the last 20 years has been a definite. I can't think of the word, but something goes down. A definite degradation in the quality of politicians. And to be fair, I think, without it's fairly obvious where my loyalties lie. But I think Starmer's the opposite of that. We don't want a personality as a prime minister. We don't want a character, an entertainer. We want somebody who's serious and boring and just gets on with the job. But anyway, that's that.
So that's been the main thing this week, then, hasn't it?
Certainly, going the full week was the D-Day debacle. I mean, the thing is, imagine being invited to a international thing where the president, as a human being, imagine being invited to something like that, and you decide not to go. Imagine being the British Prime Minister and you decide not to go. Totally inexplicable, incomprehensible, totally incomprehensible. I can't. There's so many layers of I just don't understand his thought processes. Apparently he didn't want to go because it was inverted commas French. Well, I think somebody needs to look at his history. I think you find Normandy's in France. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to see a photograph being stood next to Biden and Macron. Well, why? Because he's got some jobs lined up who people would find that objectionable. Well, what about sucking it up and doing what's required as the British Prime Minister, mate?
Yeah.
Although he's happy that.
Go on. I was going to say, didn't he didn't want did he have the photo with the three of them?
No, he didn't. No, Cameron stood in for him. So.
Yeah, well, he's taller, isn't he?
He's what? Sorry.
Taller.
Well, could be that. I mean, I don't think Biden's particularly tall. He's quite stooped over, isn't he? So, but the odd thing is he wasn't prepared to have a photograph of them. Assuming that was one of the things. But he's at the G7 summit and he's had a photograph with the Italian fascist leader. So what's the difference? I think it's really interesting, isn't it? It'd be interesting to see what job he gets. Although people are saying the job he's been touting for in California with some tech bros, they're not going to be wildly impressed when he loses. Well, we don't employ losers, so
yeah.
But let's see what he gets in California in October or whenever he gives up his. Assuming he doesn't lose his seat in North Yorkshire, he might, but he'll certainly give it up in the autumn and disappear off, never to be seen ever again. Hopefully, apart from Remembrance Sunday, of course.
Yeah, a lot of these politicians aren't employed by these companies for being winners. They're there for the contact, aren't they? Oh yes, I know the foreign secretary. I know.
Well, that's true enough. Yes, you're right. For lobbying, although what's his name? Nick Clegg.
Nick Pegg. Peg leg.
He's something to do with whatever Facebook's called, Meta or something, isn't it? And he does pop up on radio programs and such like every so often, defending the indefensible.
He seems to have disappeared. I haven't seen him for yonks.
Who? No, it depends what media outlets you look at, listen to. But he does pop up on Radio 4 and stuff. Defending the indefensible. But to be fair, not so much recently, because it's presumably he's made his money and he's thinking, well, I'm a bothering doing this now. He'll probably give it up. But anyway, the most important thing that happened today in the general election in the United Kingdom 2024 is I got my postal vote, and I hot-footed down to the post box and sent it back. And so
it came through today, did it?
It did, and I did it straight away, so why not? So it's my postal vote is in the post box, waiting to be collected. It's and if only you lived in Redditch, John, you might actually get to count it. Is that still going to be a thing? Are you allowed to say that in public?
I haven't heard anything yet. So
you might have got a letter, if not.
Well, that's the thing. They might have sent me a letter rather than an email, so I haven't had any emails. So hopefully you're going to get back. It'll be something that probably said, "Oh, can you come to a training day?" Because they do have training days. And
they go, "This is what you do: 1, 2, 3, 4."
Please tell me how many votes there are here. Yeah. So I'm hoping there's a letter when you get back. So.
Well, it's surprising how much time you have on some of these things, because I've seen stuff on Twitter and it's not X, by the way, it's Twitter. I've seen things on Twitter that say you can still register for a postal vote up to the 19th of June, which is as of today's next week, and you can still register to vote up to like the 28th of June or something. So I think they take their time on these things, and I know it's different for it to be a voting official, whatever the terminology is, but it looks like they take themselves or give themselves plenty of time. So.
I mean, I keep meaning to apply for a postal vote, because it's a lot easier at the end of the day than dragging yourself out.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the reason we did it is because me and my wife disagree. When I used to work, I always used to go first thing before I went to work. I wouldn't be banging on the door, but I'd go there, and it was, it's frequently sunny in the morning, and it just felt nice, and you walked in, and whereas Charlotte wanted to go after work, and I thought, well, when I get home, I can't be bothered. I'm not saying I couldn't be bothered voting in a general election, but so we said, well, in which case then, let's get a postal vote. And to be fair, I find I voted in every vote now, whereas I wouldn't necessarily have voted in every vote. I would have voted in a constituency Westminster vote. I would always vote in that. I wouldn't always necessarily vote in a council election before I got my postal vote. So it's
or the police commissioner.
Well, exactly. 100%. But that's exactly. But I do miss the exercising your franchise by walking in the local school or wherever it might be. It's a funny little gazebo thing where I am now. But the sort of public gazebo thing that they pretend is a village hall, which is a glorified greenhouse. But I miss that. And it was funny enough. I was thinking, my daughter.
That greenhouse. Yeah. Can they get 4 people in the voting boxes in there?
Yeah, it's got a kitchen and everything. It's quite a big thing. I mean, it must be stiflingly hot when it's a sunny day, but yeah. I mean, it would only be one box. But when you say four boxes, or did you say 4 people? Is that the police coming to arrest some dodgy character in the cemetery?
That's right, wandering around, not doing anything.
Remember, whatever you do, John, don't have anything metallic looking in your hands, like in America.
Believe it or not, I've got my metallic earphone case in my hand.
Yeah, well, throw everything down. But
it's just banging my leg when I'm walking.
Yeah, I was just thinking my daughter will be able to vote in the next general election, and I thought, and it'd be nice that she actually goes and does it rather than gets a postal vote. But anyway, yeah, God, time flies by. It's ridiculous. I hadn't really thought about that. Next general, we'll say famous last words. The next general election, if it's 4 or 5 years, not necessarily if there's some disaster, but of some form or another. But yeah.
Well, the next council election, she'll be able to vote in, won't she? I mean, they're every 2 years, isn't it?
No, she'll just miss that. I don't want to give her age away too much on the public thing, but she'll just miss that. But yeah. But yeah, so it's all good. Although I must admit, I've never listened to many. so many podcasts in the last couple of weeks because I don't mind looking at the odd election stuff on the internet, on Twitter and stuff, but the endless repetition of utter BS on BBC News and bulletins and stuff, I think, God. And then even the people you don't find objectionable, you think, I've heard this 14 times already. And then you've obviously got Farage and these fellow fascists who for some reason get ludicrous amounts of airtime. They've got no MPs, they've got 2 councillors in the entire country. I mean, Green are a bit weird as well, but they've got 100 odd councillors and an MP for 10 years. You hardly ever see them on the TV or the radio. Quite how the right-wing fascist party seems to get airtime is beyond. I don't understand it. Do they think that exposing him to public gaze is more likely to make people not vote for him? Well, I don't think it. Because he just lies. He just lies, and nobody ever challenges him. Nobody says what's your plan for the economy, because he hasn't got one. All he bangs on about immigration and nastiness, and you think, this is not good. Hold him up to the proper. Don't give him the airtime, or hold him up to the same questions that everybody else gets. He was saying today, apparently.
Right. Sorry, go on.
He was saying today how he doesn't feel safe in public transport, but somebody said
he chucked something at him.
Well, I know that, but then which is wrong. But somebody said, but we're talking about going on the train to Manchester. Wouldn't you go first class? Are you seriously telling us that you think you'd be attacked in the first class section of a train to Manchester? Yes, he said. Well, and the guy goes, by whom? Oh, well, the left wing mob. The left wing mob in a first class compartment. It costs about 350 quid. But in fact, more than that, probably costs about 400 or 500 quid. So I don't know. So he apparently gets driven in a limousine. He gets driven in a limousine around the country now, presumably waving out the windows as he goes past. Anyway, every country's got its cranks. Hopefully, famous last words. Other than Johnson, we've other affairs and Truss. Crikey, I forgot. I can't. It does make you wonder if Farage thinks he'll be the next Tory leader come the election.
It'll be low key because the Labour Party will be in, but there'll be a leadership election which won't get much coverage. But
well, you say that. I think it'd be fair because the journalists can't resist it, can they? I mean,
well, no. It'd be interesting if she loses a seat.
Well, it's not beyond. It's
not beyond the bloody realms of.
It isn't, because the interesting thing about Sunak is that his constituency has Catterick Army Garrison in it. Now, Catterick Garrison is the biggest army garrison in the UK, and it's actually the biggest army garrison in Europe. But that's a by the by. But so you wouldn't think that many of the people who are registered to vote in Catterick would be wildly impressed by Sunak leaving the D-Day thing last week. So certainly, if there was tactical voting, he would lose. If you had the Labour and the Liberals together, he would lose. So that would be quite funny. Although
he has the option of saying he won't stand either. I'll resign after the election.
Well, he's not going to say any of that, is he? Because it's he's not going to.
No, he's definitely in danger of being not that.
I think so. And if you add in the racist vote as well, it depends whether the racists vote for reform or will tactically vote to get rid of them. But we'll see.
It's a margin majority at the last general election, did it?
I think it's got about 20,000, which would seem to be very comfortable, but it isn't very comfortable now. I mean, I don't buy into some of these polls that show Conservatives ending up with like 72 MPs or 56. And I think that's rubbish. But I think there will be some big casualties. And I don't know. I don't know if Farage will win either, to be honest. I hope he doesn't, obviously, because if he doesn't win, he can't become Tory leader because he won't be an MP. But we'll see.
From his Reform Party, wouldn't he?
Well, it was not a party member. This is the odd thing. I don't know if you know, and anybody listening to us know that the Reform Party is not a party as such. It's it's a private company owned by him and this Rice guy. So the interesting. This is why these people are grifters, which is American expression for fraudsters. That they've had about 20,000 people joined their party, And when you join the Reform Party, you get no rights at all. You don't get to vote who the leader is. You don't get any say on. There's no local constituencies. You don't get any vote on who stands in your local area. All we're doing is giving 25 quid to bloody Farage and this Rice person because it's their company, and it's not illegal. But it just shows you these people, absolute delusional idiots who join this company, and you literally get nothing. It's like, you remember when you were a kid, you would join a sort of a club out of a comic or something, and you would get sort of your special agent badge or something near the post. That's it. That's literally all you get.
Well, I didn't realise that. I'm a friend who's been pushing the Reform Party. I wonder if it's quite interesting.
Well, he's not a mutual friend of mine, but I know who you mean. But the short person syndrome always makes people bitter and twisted. Oh, and
shareholder either.
No, exactly. Of course, he's not a shareholder. It's a private company. So it's just giving them money. All right. As far as it's only the same as crowdsourcing. You get, which I have done. I've given 2 or 3 times to crowdsourcing things on the internet of something that I think is a good idea or needs supporting. But I suspect most people who are giving money to the Reform Party believe they're joining it. Well, they are up to a point, but only like joining a closed club of which you have no control or say or anything or rights or anything. It's quite crazy. Not illegal, but does make you wonder. And they could say, "Well, I was just giving them money to help them." Yeah, but it's not what it says on the tin. It says join our party. Yeah, give me the money and join our party. What can I do once I'm in your party? Nothing. It's my party. Thanks.
That's right.
Yeah. Total grifter. And Farage's money is nobody. There was several years, and I've seen him being doorstepped in the street by, I think it was an ITV reporter. Can you explain how you made a living between 2015 and 2019? Because you appear to have no form of income, and the suspicion is that he was funded by right-wing organisations whose own funding is unknown, and has links to Russia and all sorts of things. So it's all very peculiar. It's
almost needs a special investigation.
It probably will. It probably has had all. I mean, I must admit, I tend not to watch these documentaries so much anymore because they drive me mad. But it probably has had something 5-6 years ago on Channel 4 on a Friday night or something that nobody watched, and it no doubt will have something else next year post the election. But these things don't seem to cut through like they used to.
Yeah, but I suspect if they get any MPs, who knows, they might get one. That then it becomes more of a. I mean, but isn't Farage, and then he closes the company.
Well, I know exactly. Well, that's when he buggers off to America or wherever to help his other orange mate. I mean, will he close his company? Although this Rice guy, who nobody really knows who he is, I can't remember what his first name is, but he's sickening.
He's standing as well, is it?
He's standing in another Brexity place whose name escapes me, somewhere near Grimsby, sort of Lincolnshire. Oh, Boston, is it, in Lincolnshire, somewhere like that?
Is that a big Brexit place? Is it?
Yes, that's why they're standing there. Clacton, where Farage is standing in Boston, they were like 82% Brexit or something. But Clacton is the third poorest. Or let me rephrase that. Clacton is the poorest borough within any. It's the poorest ward within any constituency in the entire country, but it's not the entire constituency. It occasionally pops up on TV programs. Is it Frinton or something? There's a village that is basically, it was originally a holiday village, but people now live in it, and it's all fallen to pieces and all the rest of it. It pops up on the news every so often, and all the people there are all ill and dying at age 62 because of smoking and drinking and all the rest of it. But they all voted Brexit. But
I thought Frinton was that place where people went. It's a big retiree. Frinton on Sea, unless that's a different place.
Well, I'm probably thinking of somewhere else. Anybody who's listening and remotely interested, you'll have to Google it. But it's certainly it's a very poor place. Let's put it that way. And the buildings are all semi-temporary, but being done up to be mostly okayish. But then people can't afford to keep them going and all the rest of it. But they vote Brexit and they vote Farage because they just don't like. Why? I suppose it's the classic falling out of society. I'll vote for this guy because he appears to be a disruptor. But in reality, it's similar to Trump. He really dislikes these people, just uses them, doesn't care about them, takes their money, vote for me, you'll never see me ever again. I won't be a local MP, blah, blah, blah,
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm a stockbroker. I know what it's like to be poor.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And I take money from sources that you'll never know about. For what purpose? Well, A, to keep me in a good standard of living, and B, to go around disrupting British society, because then that makes you wonder, well, who's got it was not an intention, but who's got who gains from Western society, so British society being in uproar? Not that we're in uproar particularly, but who gains by Britain leaving the EU? Who gains by Farage becoming the Tory MP? Who gains by becoming the leader? Who gains by becoming Prime Minister? Not that any of that will happen, touch wood. But I think you don't have to look too far to see the sort of people who gain by that. But anyway,
just Farage, if he gets elected, he'll be, as a Reform MP, but then he won't, because he'll be an independent. You don't see an independence in Westminster on the TV, and then he'll be jumping up and down and moaning.
Well, no, the first thing he'll do though is he won't walk across the floor of the House, because he won't have to walk across the floor because he'll be on the same side. He'll join the Conservative Party as an MP. He'll get voted as an MP, join the Conservative Party, and then put himself up for being the Conservative leader at the leadership thing.
So I don't even parties merged with the Tory Party Limited.
Well, yeah, the Tory Party is a proper party, to be fair, but yeah, and so but he's got to win. He's got to become an MP to do that, and I don't know what the polls say. He's obviously going against the Conservative rather than Labour, but
that would create quite a circus. That would, if Farage became Tory MP, and then there's a leadership.
Well, they will, but, and having just lost by, the famous last words, of course, this will be her, but having lost in theory to a large majority, we don't know, but, having lost to a large majority, let's I know what we'll do, let's get even more extreme. Why do political parties do that? I just, why do they do that? It's the classic, nobody voted for us because they don't like us, let's make ourselves even more unlikable.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Although, to be fair, they keep going on about this Canadian analogy in the early 90s, where the Canadian Conservative Party literally got crushed to about a dozen or so MPs, and they merged 10 years later with these right-wing nutters, changed the name of both parties, came back, and I think, well, obviously they're not the leading party now, but they're neck and neck. They come back to be a serious opposition party. So, but that was 30 years ago. So if the Conservative Party thinks, well, way back is to completely destroy ourselves, merge with these nutters, and we can be back in power in 30 years, yeah, good luck. But then somebody pointed out that Johnson purged. You forget all these things. In the 2019 election, but the 6 months beforehand, he made it impossible to actually got rid of lots of sensible Conservative MPs. Not even necessarily I would necessarily agree with them, but they were sensible people. There was a big chunk of them, 50, 60, got chucked out of the Conservative Party. Even the ex-Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip, whatever his name was, if you remember him, it looked like a Undertaker's apprentice. He got, Kenneth Clark got his membership taken away, albeit he got it back later on. So Johnson purged a lot of the sensible people. And you reap what you sow. Anyway, I'll think
this week then on the election roundup.
Yeah.
What happens next week? Right.
Can we just vote now? But anyway, yeah. Well, I've voted now, but can we start counting? Get back, John, and start counting it.
Yeah. Okay, right. So I think our time is up. So for those who are listening, thanks for listening. Don't forget to tell your friends whether you liked it or not. More than happy to get whatever feedback.
Yes, and look out for us on Twitter and soon to be on Facebook as well.
We'll give you more opportunities to provide some feedback, which is what we're craving, for our ever-growing list of listeners. I think it's growing.
Yes, and if you become one of our listeners, it's for free. You don't have to join us like the Reform Party, where you get nothing. At least you get something, get a bit of output, but we're not asking for money. It's just all free.
So thanks, everybody. Listen out for the next episode, which will be coming soon. So bye for now.
Bye.
Well, that's it. Now, We want to hear what you think. So those of you who are part of the Twitterati or X-rated or whatever it is these days, you can leave your comments, good or bad, at ORC_time. We love your feedback. Remember, if you liked this podcast, tell your friends. And if you didn't, tell your friends.